PlayStation VR is so good. It's pretty far from perfect, and despite being the cheapest headset of the big three, it's still really expensive. But the feeling of immersion you get from it is so absolute that it's very easy to overlook the hefty price tag and some of the smaller technical gripes, because I haven't been this excited about a new piece of gaming technology in years. Now, I haven't tried the Oculus or the Vive, so this might be old hat to some, but for me, the sensation of putting on the PlayStation VR for the first time was nothing short of mind-blowing. You sort of assume that it's going to feel like a big screen that fills up most of your field of view, but it's more than that. The feeling of actually being inside of a video game is absolute, and it's exhilarating. There's depth. There's scale. If something is in front of you, it really feels like it's in front of you. You feel like you should be able to reach out and touch it. It's a hard thing to describe to someone who hasn't actually tried it. The common refrain is that you really can't understand what this feels like until you've actually put a VR headset on your face, and yeah, that's definitely true. I didn't quite get it until I tried it, but now I get it. It feels like a sea change, like we're at the beginning of something new and exciting. Some people are shrugging it off by comparing it to gimmicks like Kinect or 3D TVs, but it's not that. It changes the experience of playing a video game on such a basic, fundamental level that once you've tried it, it's hard to imagine ever going back to a world that doesn't have VR. Not that I'd necessarily want it to replace traditional gaming altogether, but now that I've been playing with it for a couple of weeks, I can't imagine not having it. It's amazing. But no, it's not perfect. The resolution is pretty low, giving it what's become known as the screen door effect. It's not a huge deal, and it's easy to forget once you get sucked into a game, but it's definitely noticeable. The graphics are also not quite up to par with what you're used to on traditional PS4 games, thanks to the more intensive processing requirements of virtual reality. But it still looks pretty good. And though it seems to be the consensus that the PSVR is the most comfortable headset on the market, it can still be a little bit cumbersome to wear, especially if you have glasses, which unfortunately I do. The biggest issue is the motion tracking. The PSVR uses the PlayStation camera to track both the Move controllers, which some games use to approximate your hands in the VR world, and the VR headset itself. This technology is obviously not quite there yet, at least not the version Sony is using. It works pretty well for the most part. If you're playing a shooter, you're probably not going to notice anything seriously awry, but if you stop and look at your hands in the world, you're going to notice a little bit of jitteriness, even if you're being perfectly still. This jitteriness also extends to the headset itself, and is particularly noticeable if you're looking at something close up in the game world. This is easily my biggest problem with the PSVR so far. It's not always an issue, but when it is, it's super annoying and sometimes a little bit nausea-inducing. And speaking of nausea, and this is reportedly a problem with all the VR headsets, not just this one, unless you're one of those people with an iron stomach who can read on the bus without feeling sick, the PSVR is probably going to make you feel queasy. It is something you can get used to. The first day I got the PSVR, I played with it for about 3 hours, and by the end of it I was so queasy that the feeling literally did not go away for a solid day. But now I can pretty much play without any motion sickness unless I try something with a lot of movement for an extended amount of time. But this review is already getting pretty long and we haven't talked about any of the games yet, so let me talk about a few of the highlights of what launched with the PSVR. Even though it's exceptionally brief, my favorite VR experience so far is the kitchen demo that comes on the demo disc. It's tied into the upcoming Resident Evil game, and in it, you're tied to a chair and menaced by an evil zombie. It's the type of thing that would be creepy enough on a traditional screen, but in VR, it really feels like you're in that kitchen. When the zombie gets in your face, it feels like she's in your face. It's horrifying. It's easily one of the most intense horror experiences that I can recall.
Welcome, my friend, and step right up to the ride of your life.
Also on the horror front, there's Until Dawn: Rush of Blood, which is essentially an on-rails light gun shooter like The House of the Dead or Virtua Cop. A return to a genre that justifiably died in the 90s probably sounds like something you don't want to play, but this is another case of VR taking something that would be fairly mundane on a regular screen, putting you right inside of it, and making it amazing. Again, it's hard to understate how visceral and amazing the sensation is of actually being inside of this intense, haunted roller coaster. The last game I want to mention is Wayward Sky, which is kind of like a Sierra-style point-and-click adventure game crossed with Myst, leaning a bit more heavily towards Myst as there are a lot of environmental puzzles and no inventory management. This doesn't seem like it would be the most natural fit for VR. Instead of putting you in the shoes of the character you're playing, you're an observer floating in the sky, which actually works a lot better than you'd think. And it's a good thing, too, because the game is otherwise fairly unspectacular. It has a charming but slight plot, and puzzles that are so simplistic it almost feels like the game was designed for small children. The puzzles here are barely even puzzles. They're basically just minor obstacles, easily overcome with minimal brain power. And yet, I found myself oddly compelled, unable to stop playing. The game has a pretty appealing, cartoony visual design, and, at the risk of repeating myself, the sense of actually being in that world was irresistible. Because that's the thing with PSVR. I'm gonna say this for about the millionth time this review, but it really feels like you're in the game. The fact that this technology is still in its infancy, and that VR headsets are only gonna get sharper and lighter and more responsive, is mind-blowing. I mean, if it's already this good now, give it a few more years and it's pretty much going to be the holodeck.